We'll begin in the Northeast, where many people got their first taste of winter. Snow fell in places like Pennsylvania and New York after months of drought. It was a similar scene in the Midwest, where Chicago had its snowiest November day in 5 years.
On the West Coast, many people are still reeling from record-breaking rainfall. Nearly 200,000 customers still without power in Washington state. In Northern California, you see it there. Vineyards are flooded, and the rain is not over yet, which means there are concerns about potential mudslides. Meteorologist Bill Cairns is standing by to track it all, but we start with NBC News national climate reporter Chase Kane. He's out in Mendocino County in California. Chase, talk to us about the conditions where you are right now, and I understand there's still concern about flooding.
Okay, we've had some peaks of sunshine over the last hour or so, which is deceiving because there is still a river flood warning in effect for several rivers here in Northern California. That's because there is a delayed effect. When you get this much rain, it has to flow somewhere. So it flows into the streams and then eventually into the rivers. That's why several rivers here north of the San Francisco Bay Area in Mendocino and Sonoma counties are just now beginning to crest. There's a few miles away from where we are in Mendocino County. Caltrans had to close that a little while ago because the Navarro River was already starting to come up out of its banks. That's one of the reasons that several school districts in Sonoma County canceled classes today. They didn't want students and school buses out on the roads in conditions like this. There's also a few thousand people still without power this morning. So even though the rain is starting to push south a little closer to the San Francisco Bay Area and folks farther to the north are starting to dry out, there is, again, still that threat of flooding as we go throughout the rest of the day today. Kate and Sinclair.
Chase, thanks so much. Bill, let's bring you in. I had to go digging for my rain boots the other day. How much rain is in the forecast, and what should people be expecting for Thanksgiving travel?
Yeah, everyone wants to know that and get ahead of it. So a big, huge storm that we've been dealing with on the west and the atmospheric river is still pointed right at San Francisco at this hour. We've had extremely heavy rainfall rates over the last couple hours. Not fun landing at SFO either. Now, Santa Rosa is just getting some lighter rain. This will eventually shift to the south, but we still have another 1 to 2 inches of rainfall to go in many areas throughout this region. San Francisco included, Sacramento, the Chico, little lighter amounts up Eureka and Crescent City. So let's talk about Sunday. Sunday is one of the busier travel days. We have a new storm that's going to be coming to the west. Not as powerful as the last two, but it's still going to cause some travel issues out there. Snow levels will be pretty high, so it's mostly going to be a rain event unless you're going through some of the highest passes. But we could have some airport delays possible. Seattle, Portland, San Francisco. Anyone driving, obviously, on the I-5. And we'll see some snow breaking out, too, if you're heading into the central portion of the country. Everyone traveling into the middle or to the east looks just fine. Then let's go to Wednesday. They call this the busiest travel day of the year. We're going to have a pretty active weather pattern through the middle of the country. We're going to have some areas of snow throughout, still lasting with the exiting storm in the Sierra, also through Colorado. As far as rainy weather goes, looks like that'd be heading into the middle of the country. For anyone traveling on Thanksgiving Day, especially in the west, that's when things clear out nicely. Shouldn't have any problems. The east is going to be a mess. So anyone traveling from the west to the east, this looks problematic. This looks like it could be a pretty decent storm, maybe even some severe weather, some snow on the north side of it Thanksgiving Day. You notice bitterly cold. That's going to be a theme as we head towards the end of next week. We really snapped our fingers from what was a really mild pattern to a very cold pattern across the country. And here's your airport impacts on Thanksgiving Day. The eastern corridor is going to be problematic while most of the west is fine. So not what you want to hear is that on Wednesday, Thursday next week, an impactful storm for everyone's travel.
All right, pull out those coats. Bill Cairns and Chase Kane, thank you both so much. Now to breaking news on the federal criminal case against Sean Diddy Combs, the music mogul appearing in a New York City courtroom, pushing to secure his release from jail ahead of his trial in May.
Combs faces charges of sex trafficking and racketeering. Prosecutors allege that he was the leader of a criminal enterprise that facilitated the sexual abuse of dozens of men and women in a scheme that spanned decades. Combs has pleaded not guilty and disputes the charges against him. Let's bring in NBC News legal analyst and criminal defense attorney Danny Ceballos, who's been following all this with us. Danny, this is the third time now that Sean Diddy Combs is asking for bail. The prosecution has accused him of intimidating witnesses from behind bars. How does that factor into the decision the judge has to make now?
When considering bail, there are exactly two issues at play. Number one, is the defendant a threat to the community? And number two, will the defendant run away? Is he not likely to show up for trial? What happens here is when defendants get into jail and start intimidating intimidating witnesses, then the government will say that that means that he is a threat to the community, even though he's in jail. The notion that he may be intimidating witnesses is a kind of threat to the community. And Diddy, like many federal prisoners, is watched. The phone calls are monitored. It's hard to play games with the system and try to reach out and contact potential witnesses. So that's what the government is arguing, that not only should he remain without bail, but because of his behavior since he's been incarcerated, that shows that keeping him in prison, or excuse me, keeping him in the detention is warranted.
And Danny, you're a criminal defense attorney. I imagine part of the reason that they would want him out of jail is that it's easier, or in detention rather, it's easier to work with him as his defense, right?
I cannot tell you what a difference it makes to have a client out as opposed to in custody pending trial, because when they're out, I can pick up the phone, I can send an email, I can talk to them anytime I like. If I want to discuss strategy with someone who's in a detention center, I have to schlep down there, turn over my electronics, go through the metal detector, wait as long as the prison officials want me to wait for the client, and then I get maybe a couple hours with them. It's really challenging. It makes a huge difference to have your client out rather than in.